Welcome to the Institute for Soccer Parenting, soccerparenting.com. I'm Sky Eddie Bruce, and I am thrilled to be joined today by Dr. John Cohn. John is an old friend of mine. He and I used to work goalkeeper camps back through college and afterwards with Tony DeChico and the Soccer Plus camps. And John has since gone on, received his PhD in kinesiology, and has truly established himself as a leader in the United States for soccer-focused sports science. He is the founder and CEO of Fit for 90. And you might have heard of Fit for 90 recently in the news. We've seen a lot of different information about it in different broadcasts. Most recently for me, I heard Julie Foudy give you a nice little call out during the Women's Final Four, a couple times mentioning Fit for 90. So that was great. I guess has Duke been using your program, John?
Yeah, so we were with Duke this year on the women's side. That was obviously probably our high achiever on the women's side. We had about 16 teams this college season. Our high achiever on the men's side was Wake Forest. So we had, obviously Duke getting the finals was great. Wake Forest was ranked number one for the better part of the year and lost in the Elite Eight. So we're pretty close to getting two teams.
That's great.
One in the Final Four, one on the men's side, one on the women's side. So that would have been great, but it's a good year.
It's been phenomenal for me to see your company grow. I know how hard you've worked just to get it up and running and to be so precise about it. So, to see it taking off and to see it gaining some real traction has been really exciting for me. So congratulations.
Thanks.
So tell us about Fit for 90. It's a player monitoring and periodization platform. Explain that to parents so they have an idea of what you're doing with Fit for 90.
Yeah, so there's two aspects to what we do. One's a periodization system where we deliver sports science support to a large number of teams, from NWSL, NASL level teams to the professional level, large amount of college teams, ECNL and academy teams. And what we do with that is essentially give the coaches a framework of each training session throughout the entire day, for each day rather, throughout the entire year, to help them better manage the players in terms of training loads, type of work, and so forth. So essentially it's a sports science consultancy, so to speak. From the monitoring standpoint, we developed a monitoring system, a subjective system where the players report every day how they're feeling in terms of sleep, mood, stress, and so forth, musculoskeletal reporting in terms of sites of soreness and so forth, as well as hydration. And that allows us to track the players over a long period of time. So the way it links, obviously, with the coaches is giving you information on the front end. It gives you a clear indication of your player's readiness to perform the training session or the match that's coming up. And then obviously when I go in and plan a session as a coach, I need to at least be thinking about the overall load of my training session. So after the training session, the players report how difficult it was, in simple 1 to 10, how difficult the training session was, multiplying that by the duration of the session. You get a very a good indication of the training load. So obviously, now the coach is understanding, did I hit the mark with my training session more consistently?
Right.
That's an important piece. I mean, from research, we know that disconnect is there. The coaches oftentimes think a session's hard, and the athletes think it was easy, and vice versa.
Right.
And obviously, the more closely tied those are together, the better the environment the coach is creating for those athletes. So obviously, there's an education piece to this that's really important.
Right. How exactly are you doing the monitoring for each athlete? So just run through the exact process. If somebody was interested in this, what would their child be? How would they be connecting with their coach?
Yeah, so essentially it's meant to be very mobile based. So the players each morning fill out on their phone a simple questionnaire in terms of fatigue, mood, stress, general muscle soreness, sleep quality, sleep quantity.
Good.
That kind of builds up the global measurement of the player's readiness. And then once they submit all the information through the system, the coach goes into their interface, and they're obviously looking at that player's data, the data for the team. You can group it any way you like to look at the individual player within the team.
So let's take a step back and look at the big picture of what a coach is trying to get to, and then let's bring it down to a little bit more micro level for each player. What is the whole purpose of the periodization in general? Why are we seeing that this is important? What's a coach trying to get through this?
Well, general flow in terms of thought process and methodology has to start with a plan, right? And so obviously each individual training day you're going in with the plan, right? And obviously that plan needs to be considering where you've been and where you're going. And so really periodization is a highfalutin word for planning, right? And so obviously within soccer what we want to do is this definition of planning would be, maximizing short-term performance while optimizing long-term development.
Exactly.
And so while we play a lot of games, Saturday and so forth, we want the players to be ready for those games and be at their peak performance level, because ultimately the game, that's one of our best learning environments, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we can't, even for development's sake, a lot of coaches will say, well, the game's not as important at this age because it's more about development. Well, don't forget the game's about development. So you need to leave them entering that environment fresh, ready to perform. Cognitively, they're going to learn more if they're fresh and ready to perform. So they're going to walk away having a better learning experience. So the development is going to be there by taking this approach as well. So essentially, that's the goal of the periodization, is to build up this long-term plan for the team. And obviously, it's team-based. We mentioned going down to the individual. When we get into the individual, you're still dealing with individuals within a team, and everybody responds subtly differently to whatever I do physically.
Mm-hmm. Could a coach then tailor a training session to say, hey, that individual reported that they weren't really taxed yesterday, and so this next session I need to tailor it a little bit more to them, or is that not necessarily what you're doing?
To some extent, that's one of the effects of effective monitoring. I think what happens more often than not is, we build our training sessions with technical and tactical ideas in mind as coaches, right? And what happens more often than not is we'll plan a training session out, and unwittingly, we'll overload our midfielders because we do something that's functional and specific to those midfielders. So what ends up happening is the training load creeps away from us for that specific group of players, right? Yeah. Or in that environment, the defenders may just be feeding balls in and so forth, and their load is relatively light. So it starts on the front end of developing the periodization, the coach having the education in the background to be able to look at an exercise, recognize these differences, and balance the work to rest ratios and stuff accordingly, so the group walks out with the same training load. Because ultimately, when those midfielders come out of the session and they say today was an 8 out of 10, and everybody else is telling you it was a 5, right. Well, there's a reason why they said that. And so now it gives the coach the ability to go back and problem solve, recognize maybe where they went wrong, and then say tomorrow, well, because yesterday was an 8 and it should have been a 5 for this group, well, I have to change the plan today for them to make sure that I'm accommodating accordingly. Because if I do it again, what we're doing is essentially sending these individuals, these 4 players or 5 players or what have you, down to overuse pathway. So instead of having a positive trajectory to their performance, I'm getting a negative one.
Right. When does player monitoring become important? At what age?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that question gets asked in regards to periodization as well. And I think both of them become increasingly important as the athlete starts to grow. So obviously in males, as we're starting to approach that growth spurt at 14 years old, it becomes important at about 13 because we want to get ahead of the curve. Mm-hmm. With females, obviously that growth happening earlier, we want to get ahead of that curve. So it becomes increasingly important to periodize and monitor as the players approach that growth curve, because ultimately we know as they grow faster, there's an increased sensitivity to injury.
How can parents reach you? Are you starting to do this individually? What is your process in terms of what's going on with the youth game? I know you have a partnership with the ECNL.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we have two major partnerships, one with the ECNL, one with US Club Soccer. Okay. Most of what we've done has been team-based in terms of the periodization as well as the monitoring. We're actually in the process now where we're starting to build out an individual-based platform. Oh, good. So with the data we collect, from the readiness to the specific site soreness, we're collecting enough information to drive an exercise prescription. And so with this data, what we're doing now, and I've spent a large amount of time developing the methodology, we're going to take this data that the athlete's reporting every day, obviously display to them their information, but when that information comes through, we can drive an exercise prescription for injury prevention, recovery, and so forth. So in essence, by tailoring it down to the individual, we're not dealing with the common problems of an ACL injury prevention program that's additive to what the team's doing on a given day and so forth. We can get the training stimulus correct. So if your daughter's coming in and she's doing our training after her training session, we're accounting for her readiness in the morning, the training load that she just experienced, the fact that she's doing it after a training session, to get to a very specific exercise prescription that's taking all those things into account. Yeah, I think for me, I look at it, we always talk about it this way with our group, the people working on it, is I try and put it in reference to if I was working with a team, hands-on, one team, what would I do? Mm-hmm. And how can we develop that into a software and they have the methodology at the same level and the same approach? And I think this is a I think we've done that very well on the periodization aspect with the team. I think this is building that into the injury prevention piece at the individual level.
That's great, John. Well, hey, I really appreciate your time with us today. This information, as you said, is super important for parents to understand, to sort of be on the cutting edge of that in terms of injury prevention for their children, and to know that these are opportunities and options that the coach can sign up for with a team subscription as well. I appreciate your time today. Thanks for joining
Absolutely.
us.
Enjoyed the conversation.